recording. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. For those of you I might not have had the opportunity to meet, I am Shannon Stein. I'm the superintendent at Lake Norman Charter School, and this is session 3 of the Anxious Generation podcast webinar that we're hosting to get our families and our community together to read and digest some of the book of the Anxious Generation, as we certainly understand that this is an important topic, our students' mental health, how technology influences that, and how, as we, as parents and educators and as a school community, can best support our students with, finding that balance of what is a necessary tool, which is technology, but also developing into well-rounded, human beings that we all want them to be. So tonight, I'm very excited. We have 2 guests with us. Our first guest is Miss Courtney Randall. She is an attorney, and in just a second, I'm going to let her introduce herself and give you a little bit more background on her professional journey and the work she's done in this area. And then there's another familiar face who's a guest with us this evening, and that's Officer Ron Bonanno, our SRO. He has been with us for many years and is keenly tuned into what he sees with the students and some of the challenges, and we're going to talk about that. Because as we read The Anxious Generation, we talked about free play, we talked about the dangers, we talked about anxiety, how things manifest for boys and girls differently. And now we're to the point on collective action. So tonight we're going to talk about, kind of some not fun topics, which is cyberbullying and online threats, and some of the things that your students are facing all the time as adolescents, and what we can do as adults to help support them and help to avoid some of those challenges so that they can remain safe. And then our next session, we're going to help parents with actual tools and actionable items that they can do beyond that. So again, I'm going to introduce, I'll start with Courtney. Courtney, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey and your work in this space?
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Courtney Randall. I went to Davidson College for my undergrad, went to law school immediately afterwards at Georgetown. I spent the first 19 years of my legal career as a prosecutor. I started as a state prosecutor for 4 years and then spent the next 15 years as a federal prosecutor working at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Charlotte. While working at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I served as a Project Safe Childhood coordinator. I predominantly prosecuted cases involving online exploitation, anyone who used the internet to victimize children, whether it be online enticement, what we now call CSAM, which is child sexual exploitation material, which we previously called child abuse material, child pornography. I worked a lot of cases involving those, was involved in training, law enforcement, and working with victims and families, and protecting basically our community here from sexual predators online. After I did that, the last 2 years, I'm still an attorney for the federal government. I just moved to a different area. But I still stay on top of the subject matter just because as a parent, I have my own kids. So personally, I do live here in Huntersville, North Carolina. My husband and I moved here in 2014, and we have 2 children that attend Lake Norman Charter. My daughter is in 6th grade in the middle school, and my son is in the 3rd grade at the elementary school.
Thank you so much. And so you can see that we have such talented, wonderful people in our community and personally connected to wanting to make LNC and the environment as safe as possible. So thank you. And then Officer Bonanno, you want to give your intro?
Yeah, sure. Officer Bo here. I'm originally from New Jersey. I went to college at Montclair State University. I earned my degree in phys ed and health, actually. I pursued that because at the time I was unsure if I wanted to follow police work or be a teacher. I was in the Army for 4 years. I kind of nailed down the whole police aspect of things in the military and then went to college. And then when I moved here, I found out that in North Carolina, there are SROs, and it's kind of something I could do to combine my 2 passions. So I've been with the Huntersville Police Department for going on 12 years now. I've spent at this time the majority of my time here at Lake Norman Charter serving as school resource officer. Some of you who have had kids younger have noticed I've earned a lot more gray hairs in this position, but I would like to say it's more from just age, not so much from the stress of our kids. I've enjoyed doing this. Being I've been doing it for so long, I've gone on to a lot of different specialty training that relates heavily to cyberbullying, to treating cyberbullying, to online threats, threat assessment. For that's really for tonight's purposes, but also a lot of it about building security and securing our perimeters and doing things like that. So I am very happy to be here. I am. This is one of my favorite topics to kind of go over and kind of try to share a unique perspective that's both helpful and kind of, almost solidifying some of the things you may already know.
Thanks, you guys. So, for those who are joining us online, please know you don't need to wait till the end to ask questions. If you have some, please put it in the chat because it's one of those things we want to. I think if you have a question, probably another person who's joining us has that same question, and it just enriches the discussion. So, I have some guiding questions that I'm going to ask both of our guests tonight, and then they can walk through and you guys can enhance that if you have some questions of your own or follow-ups. So I think we'll start with you, Officer Bo. What are some common online behaviors that among students that kind of can cross the line from typical peer conflict that could end up with, either legal or disciplinary consequences? What's some of the things you see?
Yeah, for sure. I would say one of the most common thing that's going to cross that line from, and I don't even like to say common bullying because that's not something that should be common. I do tell the students all the time that it's sometimes hard for us to identify, like at recess or something like that, who's being bullies because some kids who are best friends talk to each other and joke in the same manner as which kids don't like each other. So it's always hard to identify. But in order of crossing that line, the biggest thing I'll see is kids that are manipulating or using some type of firearm or weapon when it comes to alongside of a threat or something with threatening language in it. Sometimes they're real guns, sometimes they're toy guns, sometimes they're AI generated now, which is becoming more and more common. So when you're adding something like that, as we all know, and we've talked about, Ms. Stein, that if you are making a threat towards the school or a group of kids in school or anything like that, it's something that's just, there's a zero tolerance. There's not much that we can do in terms of rehabilitating at the school level with an officer or with HPD. It's just going to be an open investigation that most likely will come with charges.
Okay. So as sort of as a follow-up, can you walk us through what happens if after at school, if a parent reports a serious online threat, what does that look like if they bring it forward, and how do you see the school and law enforcement coordinating when those threats come forward?
Sure. The first step, and this is one that's like my least favorite, right out the gate, we have to identify if it's a direct threat. So was it communicated directly to the person, and that could be via cell phone, email, or in person? Is the threat believable? So if someone, we always use the term like, I'm going to rip your head off, like that's not physically going to happen. It's hard to, that won't, according to the elements of the crime, wouldn't fit. So we have to make sure that it was something said that the person believes, it put them in fear, and that it was said to them directly. So once we get past that stage, and honestly, a lot of the stuff we deal with kind of worms its way around one or two of those elements. But once we get through to that point, depending on the age of the student and if there's any history there, the best part about working at Lake Norman Charters, we do a good job of going through the rehabilitation process at the school level and allowing HPD, specifically me, to work hand in hand with everyone to make sure we don't have to go the route of an open investigation and full on charges especially if it's a student's first time, or if we are under the impression that maybe he said something, didn't know what really the power behind their words, even though starting in first grade, I explain that to them every other year.
So I think sometimes what can be really hard for parents to understand, so much is happening online now, right? So there are people that are kids going basically cyberbullying, right? But
Yes.
it's not necessarily happening within the school walls. So, and that's a really hard thing. And Courtney may even jump in here from a legal perspective. There's a limit for what schools can do. We don't police the internet, even though sometimes I think as a parent, it can feel like, well, my kid goes here and this kid also goes here and they're threatening each other. So why can't you do anything? So, what would you say to that? And Courtney, if you have any insights to where those boundaries lay, you can jump in
I would
too.
I would say that's 100% true. What we try to do at Lake Norman Charter is if it's disrupting the school day, we can certainly be involved. That's like kind of the term, right? So if it's going all around the school and in the hallways, we'll do what we can to intervene to make sure the school day gets back on track to our normal like status quo. But if people are having an issue outside of the school building, it wouldn't be hard for me to be able to assist on the side. I mean, I'm there to serve our community. It is a little tricky at Lake Norman Charter for me because if you live in a different town than Huntersville, I can lead you in a direction or even refer possibly an officer if you live in Davidson, for instance. But Ms. Randall might be able to shed some light on. I know cyberbullying and all the things that we're trying to keep up with, and we'll talk about how hard that is today.
Mhm.
Things constantly change, and I'll just name drop him here. But Detective Dylan Smith at the Huntersville Police Department is someone that I rely on to make sure that I'm doing my job in the best way possible with the most up to date information. But that's a full-time job all in of itself to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's when it comes to cyberbullying.
Yeah. Um, Courtney, is there anything you want to say to that? Otherwise, I'm going to ask you a direct question.
No, I think you
Good.
covered it really well.
Good.
On point.
Okay, so I think in this day and age where there is so much going on online, that sometimes you have people that have like kids have their own freedom of speech, right? So I think that there can be some misconceptions about privacy and freedom of speech online, and maybe could you shed some light a little bit of where does that start and end for parents and students?
Sure. I think the biggest misconception about privacy is that there is any when it comes to being on the internet. Every post, every image, every chat, everything that passes through the internet goes through a server that's owned by a company or is housed on a server owned by a company who can have access to it. Even with encryption now, there's still privacy concerns at the end, wherever it ends up. The person can screenshot and do whatever they want with it. So, but even not looking at encryption, just using any company servers, they all have their own policies, their own regulations, depending on where they're housed, their own rules that they follow. And they track your information, they share your information, and they can even report it to law enforcement if it meets a certain standard. Um, and even beyond that, law enforcement has tools they can use if you're doing something that would rise to a behavior or criminal activity.
Yeah.
Law enforcement can use subpoenas, search warrants, court orders to get access to emails, text messages, social media posts, even things that are locked down and protected. If you're committing a crime, there is a mechanism to get to it. So there is no privacy online.
Yeah.
And so if you're committing a crime, and you were mentioning freedom of speech, just like you can't go into a movie theater and scream fire or threaten someone like Officer Bo was talking about, there are crimes that apply if you do the same type of behavior online, incite violence, threaten to harm someone, if you stalk somebody online. It's hard to speak about exact crimes and exact elements
Right.
because when
Right.
you're online, what you're doing is traveling across state lines, across international lines. So it's not just North Carolina law that will apply to you. It could be Georgia law, it could be South Carolina law, it could be international law, it could be federal law. But most jurisdictions in general are going to have laws in effect that are going to cover stalking. If you're placing someone in fear of harm, if you're causing them emotional distress by emailing them or texting them repeatedly, or harassing their family members, if you're threatening them, like Officer Bo was talking about, other types of harassment or intimidation. We often see media reports of doxing or swatting, a lot of times involving celebrities, but that happens on a local level as well when people are feuding or they're trying to harass or stalk somebody. They'll dox them, which is where they post their personal information, which then can lead to either stalking or harassments or threats by other people. Or swatting is when you falsely send first responders to somebody's house claiming that something was happening there. When you're looking at online child exploitation, you have online enticement and other types of sexual material being shared online. All of that law enforcement can access. And even beyond that, sometimes online behavior can lead to other types of charges. There have been numerous media stories about things like where people are charged with involuntary manslaughter because they encouraged somebody to commit suicide by text message,
Mhm.
or didn't stop it. And so, or I mean, even drug distribution and ordering drugs and selling drugs is done online now. So all of those are crimes that law enforcement could track through IP addresses, social media accounts, images that are being posted. So when I say there's no privacy online, there really is no privacy online.
Yeah. And actually, you listed off a whole lot of things that should give us some pause as to why monitoring effectively our students' actions, because there's so many, you're talking about state lines. The people that could be committing crimes could not be, they're not here in Huntersville. They're not necessarily just here in LNC. They're everywhere. We're out there. So that's a pause for thought. Ron, what do you see as the school's response or your role in helping to have students set boundaries when it comes to making good choices for what they're posting online?
If I'm talking to the students, it depends. I try to go with them before they get to a point where they have the ability to do that, right? It's kind of what we're talking about. But at the same time, nothing I'm going to say is going to work if the parents aren't in conjunction with us with that, because at their age, as students, if they want to post something, they're going to take the path of least resistance to get what they want. So if my way isn't as fun or isn't what they want, and their parents aren't monitoring it, it's going to be hard. And I pretty much tell them that right out the gate, like the students, and I'll also share that with the parents most of the time.
Mhm.
Um, I tell them it's forever. I tell them that the internet doesn't go away. I mean, I was really popular when Snapchat first came out, and a picture post and then it goes away. I'm like, it stays in servers. You can retrieve these things, especially if there's something that rises to the level of getting a warrant and searching it, right? So I tell every kid, no matter if it's online or in person, everything you do with your hands and everything you say that comes out of your mouth, you're responsible for those, whether it's being typed or spoken in verbally. So you can't take it back. I try to do a good job of explaining consequences to the students. I always tell them you have what's most likely to happen, what's least likely to happen, and then everything in between. And you have to be prepared to take on all the responsibilities for all of those situations. You can't just think best case scenario and then do whatever action you were doing or post whatever you're getting ready to post. Because if we meet you at your door, this happened outside of school, you might see me and a detective at your door, and you're going to say, I didn't mean it, or I was joking. And a lot of times I'll let them know some of these crimes, the joke is the crime. The fact that you're joking doesn't make it okay. If you weren't joking, we'd be talking about a different crime. So people want to cry, and literally, I mean, and it's sad. You don't want to see that. That's why I tell them ahead of time, because I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I want to make sure they know. And if they do it anyway, that time to help with certain things had passed on that first morning. Other things that we can work with, I would say the answer to your question, other answer is just education. We could speak with them if they post something that they're going to be in trouble for, and we can have a conversation about it. I'm a big one strike rule guy. So we'll have a conversation. We'll educate you on what we need to do. A lot of times that's going to involve the parent being there. And after that one time, there's not much after that. Now you have a pattern. You don't have an excuse anymore.
Thanks, Ron. Um, so it's interesting because we actually had, Courtney, you brought up swatting. We actually had a student at Lake Norman Charter that had a very popular YouTube channel and was swatted. So we know firsthand at their home right here in Huntersville, and it was a very serious matter because people can get hurt, and so these things are not. When we're talking in the LNC community, I feel like when sometimes parents are hearing us talk, they think, oh, this can't possibly happen. We've had distribution of sexual material amongst students. We've had kids making some choices online that are pretty challenging. And what we're hoping is that we're going to always diminish those. One of the things, especially with online gaming and, access with basically child predators who know where to find kids and can behave as kids, especially with AI. Courtney, what signs would you tell parents to look for that they may think that, could be a telltale that their child is being targeted or, being exploited online?
Sure. One of the biggest ones I think you would see is some changes, if they're allowed online, some changes in their online habits. They become more secretive about what they're doing. They're hiding from you what they're doing. They're deleting their browsing history. They have apps where they can hide. You find an app where they're hiding something in it. They close their screen when you walk in the door, only look at their phone when they're in their bedroom with the closet door closed, things like that, where you can tell they're hiding something for you. If they're suddenly online all the time, or not at all, like there's just a drastic change in their online behavior, that can show that there's something wrong. Either they're engaged in a relationship that they're hiding from you and they're online a lot with that, or they're scared of what they were doing online and they're trying to get away from it. If you look at their device and you find multiple accounts or hidden accounts or apps or something like that, that also is going to show that maybe they're hiding something from you, or they're doing something they don't want you to know about. If they have unknown contacts on their followers, or they're in contact with people that you don't know, you should be asking about that, because that could be a predator or someone else pretending to be a kid or a friend of theirs. Some of the more like ones you see, whether it's a hands-on offense or online, changes in grades, like if all of a sudden you see a drastic drop in their grades because they're dealing with something difficult. Mood swings, increased anxiety. Sometimes they'll engage in self-harm or show depression or talk about suicide. Another big one is if they lose interest in things they used to enjoy. If all of a sudden they don't want to participate in sports or go to club meetings or not engage in their hobbies anymore, or start losing their friends, their in-person friends. Those are all signs that something may be going on. Another big one we see online is if they have some unexplained gifts or money that you don't know. It's not unusual for a predator to send a child a phone that their parents don't know about, or give them gift cards. They're using the cards to groom kids. If they have all of a sudden a bunch of Robux, or I forget the Fortnite one, V something, I don't know that one, or all of a sudden they just have cash that you don't know where it came from. That is a big thing among predators, is they use that to get the children to keep talking to them or produce images for them. It's just a grooming technique they use. But I will also give a caveat that not every child is going to display one of those. There have been plenty of cases we worked where parents had no idea that anything was out of sorts with their child until law enforcement knocked on the door and they said, "Hey, we have this picture of your child," or "Hey, we arrested this person because they were on their way to meet your child." They didn't know. So those are some things to look. If you see those signs, you definitely need to dig into it, but don't rely on seeing those signs to think that everything's okay.
Is there any one place that well, I shouldn't say one place, but are there any like common places that maybe parents wouldn't think about or should be thinking about for where these predators know to look for kids, right? If they're wanting to groom a kid, if they want to meet a kid, based on the cases or the work that you did in the past, is there
Sure.
is there places what would you want them to know?
I would say if there is a way to communicate on the app, the gaming profile, whatever it is, there's a sexual predator on there looking for your child. When I was working these cases, I worked every gaming profile, every social media app, every chatting app. They infiltrated everything. Whatever it was, there will be a sexual predator on there, sometimes pretending to be a child, sometimes they're acting as an adult. They're just everywhere. If there's a way to chat with a child, they're going to be on it.
That's so what happens if a parent sees those signs? What would you recommend if a parent suspects, man, they did get Roblox bucks that they didn't know, or there's something, they have a feeling, there's just a gut feeling. What would be the recommendation and for maybe either one of you of how to, what should a parent do? Because they may not recognize that that's a child, somebody posing as or whatever. What would you say?
Um, Hopefully they'll be able to have a conversation with their child and talk to their child about it. Depending on the age of the child, they'll be able to talk to them. They can also look through whatever device they have access to. I mean, hopefully they've set up a system where they have the kids' passwords or access to their accounts or their gaming profiles to be able to go in there and look and see who they're chatting with or who they're talking to. Look to see if there are any photos or hidden apps or hidden photos that they don't know about that they can ask about. And then if they do discover that their child is a victim, they do have reason to believe that something has happened, report it to law enforcement, no matter how small it is. Even if your child didn't actually get to the point where they became sense something, if someone was just grooming them to do something, to meet them, or trying to get them to do something, still report it to law enforcement. Because the one thing I learned through my work is that every predator has multiple victims. So even if your
Mm.
child was able to stop the person or didn't do anything, the predator will have other victims that you can help protect if you report it to law enforcement. The other thing you can gain by reporting it to law enforcement if your child is a victim is they were going to help you with resources, whether that be counseling, education, just helping your child and you as a family get through what happened to you. Save those resources. And one thing I should mention, if you do come across something that's suspicious, don't delete it. Just leave the device as is. Let law enforcement do what they have to do so they can preserve all the evidence and go after the bad guy.
Awesome. Anything, Ron, you'd like to add to that? I saw you nodding your head
Oh
vigorously.
yeah. I agree with everything that was just said. Very passionately about it. If you want, last training I was at, I was told that Roblox is by far the #1 app or game that child predators are using currently. I mean, that can always change, but by far and away, it was more than any other one.
Mm.
But as Courtney said, I mean, all of them, you're at risk. If you do come across something, I do feel like there is some like hesitation to report it to law enforcement. I think it comes from maybe being embarrassed. I want you to know that, I mean, this is so much more common than anyone realizes, and no one's going to be judging you. No police officer is going to be judging you. We have at least one detective that works these crimes full time for a reason, and he stays busy. So don't feel as if reporting this, anyone's going to judge you like you're a bad parent. All the officers are generally, we're about the same age, right? Like we're all parents here and the same age. And we know that we can't keep up with this stuff as fast as the kids do. So don't let embarrassment or a feeling of shame that you let your kid fall into a conversation you were unaware of stop you from reporting it. It happens all the time, and it can happen to me or anyone else, right? We just do as much as we can to prevent it.
Yeah, thank you for the reassurance. And that was a great tee up to my next question, which is things do change so fast. So and we're working with teens all the time, and I'm constantly like, wait a second, what about, it's a constant struggle with that. So this is really a question for you both. Do you have any recommendations of how families can stay proactive instead of reactive in these situations? What suggestions?
Do you want me to go first or do you want to? Either one. Go ahead, Bo. I went first last time.
I'll give it a shot. Honestly, I almost feel like that you're going to be fighting a losing battle trying to be proactive instead of reactive. Because if you think you're ahead of the game, your kid's already 3 steps ahead of you, right? So my answer to that question is to foster and create a trusting and understanding relationship, because the only person that's going to be able to teach you about what your kid's going through is going to be your kid. That's not easy. That doesn't mean you have to be a friend instead of a parent. It means you have to find the perfect mix for you and your child. That's going to be different for every one person. It, of course, helps to research and look things up. You want to ask, I'm at the school all day long. Hey, what is it still Roblox? Should I look for anything else? I mean, look for everything, but I'll let you know what the most risky things are. You're letting your child go to the mall. I would think twice or not let them be there by themselves, because I think this is one of the hot spots where the child predators possibly meet up to give these gifts and stuff. But in terms of trying to keep them off of apps or games that are going to be more at risk than others, Google, honestly, there's not going to be any one website that's going to, I mean, Courtney might have some better resources, but my answer to this question is to have an understanding, trusting relationship with your kids. So if something's even going a little wrong, they're going to come and feel comfortable telling you. And if you're a parent of a 6th through 8th grader, it's going to be the hardest time to create that relationship, from what I gather as a parent and a resource officer.
Anything else, Courtney, you want to?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree that having that relationship is the most important thing. I would say, just to add on to that, is starting it early. Start having a conversation with your child about internet safety really early, before you even think they need to hear it. Because even if you don't allow access to the internet or YouTube or Roblox in your house, they're going to be going to friends' house where they are going to be able to access it, or they're going to see their friends accessing it. One of the stories I tell people is, this is an ongoing conversation in our house, just from the nature of my job. As my kids grew up, I was constantly around us. We were always having these conversations about internet safety, and my kids have known about this since they could talk and walk. And you don't really realize it, because when they're young, we talked about like basic stuff like photos on the internet, and I say why we don't do it. They weren't doing it, but why we don't post their photos on the internet, or why we don't share this information. And my daughter was at a friend's house. She was like 8 years old, and she was over with some friends. And those friends turned out they have a YouTube channel. I didn't realize they had a YouTube channel, but they have a YouTube channel. And they were making little videos of them dancing to post online. My daughter, at 8 years old, just because she'd been exposed to this, came home and she's like, oh, I told them that we don't post pictures of me online. So I'll do the dances with them, but I'll stand off on the side so I'm not in the video, but I can still participate. And everybody did it, and they did the dance. My daughter was off the video, and they posted it, and she wasn't online. And she came up with that solution all by herself, just because she had been hearing it for so long. So when you're having these conversations, you don't even realize that the kids are definitely ingraining it and then applying it to their life. And then, like Officer Bo said, Google is your friend in this case. If you hear your kids talking about an app, if you hear them wanting to use a game, or wanting to download something, find out what it is. Download it yourself. Play Roblox. If you're gonna let your kids play Roblox, play it yourself. If they're gonna have Instagram, download it yourself so you can see what people are doing on it. So you can see if there's a chat function, if there's a way to hide photos. Sorry, it's my dog.
It's okay.
But you'll be able to figure it out, so you'll know what to look for with them. Along with that open conversation, have a conversation about limits and rules with your kids. Let them know what they can and cannot do. What those are going to look like are going to be different depending on the age of your child, obviously, whether that's, devices off by a certain time, no phones in your bedroom, no games that allow chat. Talk about whether you're going to allow them to upload photos of themselves or not. And then the last thing I would say is educate yourself on parental controls that exist with all these apps. Educate yourself on monitoring software that exists out there. There's actually certain phones and watches that have monitoring software built into them. There's filtering and blocking software, but don't rely on any of these things to say to protect your child. It's going to come down to that relationship you have with your child.
It's a tool. Hey,
yeah.
And actually, I love it. You guys keep teeing up my stuff. So for those of you that are watching now, and I was going to save it till the end, but I'll share now. We are our very last session, which is going to be in January, is going to be a workshop session where we have an expert who is going to talk to you and help you actually set up parental controls, learn about different software, and basically help because it is hard. It's intimidating. It's overwhelming. You can Google, but it's so much easier when you have somebody who can walk you through and actually show you how that can be an effective tool. But as you said, those conversations early are important. And, for those parents who are not aware, we have a digital citizenship curriculum that every 5th through 8th grade student goes through at Lake Norman Charter. It is the perfect time to be having these conversations with them. And what's really great, and I would really, some of these things, you might be parents of kids who are a little bit older. So it's, when you know better, you do better. For those who are younger, if you just tell kids early, hey, here's our rules as parents. We don't post online, or we don't do this, or you'll get a regular phone at this age. You'll get you can do social media at that age. If you tell them when they're really early, they know, and they might test the boundary, but you just remind them instead of having difficult conversations and getting pressured. And kids know exactly those pain points. So, we are pretty empathetic. Let me see. So you guys covered a lot of it. Probably the last question I have is, and probably for both of you, I'd love to hear your answers. What would surprise families when it comes to what you know as a professional? Either a tough case, something they wouldn't think about, something that like, why is this so important? That's really the bottom line. Why is being actively engaged and checking phones? And this is my little Miss Stein caveat. You own the phones. You own the computers. It's yours, parents. You just remember that. There is never a time where, kids earn privacy. But you are doing that because you love them and you're checking on them because you care. It's not because you don't trust them. It's because they don't know what you know as adults. So please don't ever feel badly about helping to monitor what you know is best behavior. But now that I've given you guys a little time to think about what might surprise our parents to know, or what would be parting thoughts that you guys would want them to think about thinking with online safety.
Well, for me, it's just how prevalent the number of predators and crimes that are being committed online is happening. I went online to grab some statistics to share with the group. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we know a lot about the work they do for missing children, but the exploited children part is a huge part of what they do. and they serve as a clearinghouse for gathering tips related to online child exploitation and human trafficking and so forth. You can report any type of crime to them. Law enforcement works with them in identifying victims if they come across images of children they don't know, or in tracking perpetrators. So I went onto their website to pull the most recent data. And so they have the cyber tip line where the information gets reported. And you can report online enticement, like I said, child pornography, all of that. And just last year alone, they received 29.2 million separate incidents of child sexual exploitation. Tens of thousands of those tips resolved to victims and predators right here in North Carolina. In those reports, there were 62.9 million images, videos, and other files that were related to child sexual exploitation. With regard to communication between the predators and children, there were more than 546,000 reports of online enticement where an adult was communicating with a child in an attempt to gain for some sort of sexual purpose, which was a 192% increase over prior year. And that's consistent with what I saw throughout my entire 15 years at the U.S. Attorney's offices. The numbers of prosecution and the number of offenses being reported went up every year. But something that's a little bit of a newer trend is the rise in what they call sextortion, where people are then using images of the children or threats to the child to release images to their friends in exchange if they don't pay them money or give them more images or meet them in person. They received nearly 100 reports a day of children being sextorted. And they reported that since 2021, more than 36 teenage boys have died by suicide as a result of being a victim of this crime. So as I said, it's growing every year. And I think honestly with AI, it's just going to get even worse because the child doesn't have to actually even be in the room or send a picture or do anything. They can just take a picture of the child online, turn it into something inappropriate, and then use that to extort the child. So that's where the online communication comes, because some of these children get backed into the corner. They're scared. They're scared of what's going to happen if this photo gets out, and they think there's no way out. And that's why there's this rise in suicide.
Yes.
And then for my other thing I've learned from my professional experience in terms of, as I said, it can happen anywhere. It can also happen to anyone. Any child can be a victim. They could be the number one student in the class in terms of sports, grades, popularity. It could be a child who comes from a troubled home. It doesn't matter. Any child that has access to the internet can become a victim, just like any person can be a perpetrator. And when I say it's happening right here in our community, I literally worked cases here in Huntersville within a couple miles of my own house where search warrants were being executed for people committing these types of crimes. And there were children as young as 8 or 9 on gaming platforms who were being groomed by predators who were teaching them how to move over to other social media, such as Facebook or Instagram, so they can communicate with them without their parents knowing. And it can happen in just a few hours. So it's something to be on guard. I can't stress how serious and how often it's happening, and that we need to be protecting our children against it.
Ron, what would you add?
That was touched on a lot of things I wanted to say. I'm just trying to come down from being angry, hearing all those stats, and never I'm aware of them, and it's just I guess it's why people like Courtney and I do what we do to try to prevent it as much as possible. And it's also frustrating to know that as much work as we put in, it's just growing. I wanted to throw out there, I watched something on HBO a couple of years ago, maybe about 2 years ago. It's called Undercover Underage. And I was blown away by the how quickly they got another predator on the hook in that show. It is a little graphic in terms of the content that they're speaking on, because I would recommend you watch it with your child, but maybe watch it by yourself first, and then deem if you think it's appropriate or not. I definitely wanted to touch on it can happen to anybody. Courtney mentioned anyone that has the internet. I would throw in there that it also happens to the people that don't think it'll happen to them. Anyone who thinks they have the perfect life, because you tend to trust your children more, and you should, but that doesn't mean they deserve more privacy, right? So you make sure it's up, like that. A cell phone is the most dangerous thing anyone will ever hold in their hands, whether you're holding firearms or anything else. You need to make sure you monitor that. And that doesn't mean you need to wait till they're older to give it to them. As long as you have a plan in place, it might be even easier if they're a little bit younger and start them on different things, right? But at the same time, if you think that you can trust your child, it's not that you can't, it's that the predators are smarter than they are. They don't think they're doing anything wrong until they're caught up. And then the guilt might set in to where they don't want to share with you. And then eventually they will when they have no other way out. Unfortunately, it sounds like suicide is a way that some people do take. But otherwise, it's going to be the sextortion thing has been a pretty hot topic in terms, especially with AI and everything now. But I want like our community, I want us to know that we really have a lot of access. I mean, our kids have every new thing, all the games, all this other stuff, and they talk about it constantly. So like I know they're on there, and a lot of them I know don't have the amount of supervision that they should over it. And that's not me judging parenting. It's just a warning because I don't want to see them end up in a situation that they shouldn't be in. And again, it won't be anything against the parent. I just want to get that information to them now so that we don't have to be in that situation later.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys have given some really compelling reasons behind the need to trust your kids, but verify, have open communication, make sure kids know that you're there, that there's not anything that they can't come tell you because they get so deep in. And I do think that that's what predators are particularly good at is they know how to trap people and to plant seeds to try to separate kids from their parents. And, I will say, every parent has to make their right decision for what they believe their child needs and family needs. But, as you were going through that, I was thinking to myself, man, in talking to some parents, when you give social media too early, what ends up happening is that's one more area that you're letting people. So, maybe choosing small things like if you're going to do gaming, monitor that, see as a family if you can monitor that and work your way into it because our kids' lives are pretty stressful. And so there's just a lot of avenues that people can get in and they need to be well armed and your own kid's maturity. So that's why we make the recommendation to really give that some thought. And that can be hard, to try to figure out. So,
We did early, and you're aware, Miss Stein, that my daughter and I would make donuts together, and we had like our own little business that we ran. So we had an Instagram page for that, and I ran it, but she got to look at it all the time, and she'd ask me, "Hey, can my aunt follow us?" And I'm like, "All right." Or she looked at it and clicked on something, and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Oh, that's just Aunt Jamie," and I'm like, "Well, you didn't ask permission for that to happen." And while of course that's fine, you don't get to make that decision now. That's why we're
right,
doing it now. I do feel like that conversation would be harder if she was like in 8th or ninth grade and we were just
right.
starting out. It's like that seems silly. Like I get that. Like but you know what I mean? It almost would have the reverse effect. So like you're saying, the donut thing was perfect because we just kind of ran it together. I had first access, and if she ever wanted to look at my phone, she's able to do it. And it was actually a lot of fun to do together too. It was like kind of something and just
Yeah. So
we had together.
yeah, and there's definitely positives too online. We're talking about some of the scary stuff, but it's about finding that balance and being engaged with with what your children are doing. So I have a couple other things before I let the whole group go, but I do want to very much thank Courtney and Officer Bonanno for joining us tonight and sharing their expertise. They deal in tough stuff and they take that tough stuff on to try to protect the youth in our community and area. And we very much appreciate both of your work in that area. So thank you for giving of your time. We appreciate that. Real quick, I just want to share with the group one additional resource. After some of the other conversations we've had about some of the anxiety and some of the ways that online usage can hit kids, this is a book that was recommended by some really good professionals that I believe in. Charles Fay was the person who wrote Discipline with Love and Logic. It has been around. He's been around forever. That book is excellent if you want to know how to work on disciplining your kids with natural consequences and choices. But he helped to write this too, How to Raise Mentally Strong Kids. And it's a different world. And I think that's sometimes what we have to acknowledge is that the world that our kids are living in is different than the ones we were raised in. So sometimes we think we can relate, but it's really difficult when you think about all the challenges of wanting to fit in and be social and navigate who you are as an individual. If you really think back to what like middle school and early high school is, there's a lot of things you go through, and I can't imagine having a lot of online influences on that at the same time. And then our kids, I'm always impressed that they're able to navigate that. But there's some great resources. So I did want to just pass this along to our audiences. If you're looking for a way to come up with strategies on how to raise kids to be mentally tough in a pretty tough area, this is a good book. And then lastly, let's see if I can change page. Just a reminder that our next session is going to be January 20th at 6:30 p.m. January 20th, 6:30. And it's a We Know Better, We Can Now Do Better workshop. And so it's going to be done by Liz Jones. She has really taken on a lot of professional development around the area of how to protect kids online and workshopping, resources, tools, and she is going to share that, and it's going to actually be an interactive, active, a little bit different format than this, where parents can come and will actually be able to do some tasks so that they can set things up. And she will serve as a guide for you afterwards if you have ongoing questions. So we're excited that Ms. Jones is willing to do that, and we're looking forward to that workshop. So again, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We hope you found this to be interesting and some food for thought. And we all are here to help support our kids and come together as a community. So, even outside of the podcast, please feel free to reach out. There's a lot of caring professionals at Lake Norman Charter that want the very best for your kids. Good evening.